Bill Bruce, the one and only Chief Executive Officer. Tell us what the CEO does for the AANA.
I'm the fulcrum between what an organization wants to do and what an organization can do.
In any of those prior roles, was there anything like the interprofessional or inter-industry tension?
The noise it's constant. There's always some amount of attention that we have to give to it.
How long do you think it would be until CRNAs had a significantly negative impact if the AANA did not exist?
Most immediate. It'd be very quick. Thanos snap, right?
Hey everyone, real quick, if you're listening to this, you're probably the kind of anesthesia provider who wants to understand more than just how to push drugs. This podcast is about understanding what's really going on, whether it's legally, clinically, or financially, and the often small but powerful ways you can protect and advance your career outside of the OR. Anesthesia Deconstructed is already one of the top podcasts, at least in anesthesia. Out there, we get a few thousand listens per episode, but subscribing helps us keep that momentum, and it helps us bring on more compelling guests, better commentary, and the kind of insight that actually moves our careers forward. Subscribing is free. It helps us keep doing what we are trying to do, and it means you'll stay sharp, connected, and stay a step ahead. So please hit the subscribe button and enjoy the show.
All right. Bill Bruce, the one and only Chief Executive Officer of the AANA, a organization that represents 60,000 CRNAs and nurse anesthesia residents across the country, the largest, the most influential body for CRNAs in the country. You're the CEO. Why don't you define your role for us? Tell us what the CEO does for the AANA and ultimately the value that role is providing to those 60,000 people. And of course, no pressure, since we're putting this in the very first part of the podcast. And thank you for being on.
Thank you, Joe. Always happy to be here. I think, currently we are just over 65,000 members. And this is the month in the year that we define that for the annual cycle. And it's not going to be 65,000 for very much longer. It's going to be a different number, which we look forward to sharing. I'm the fulcrum between what an organization wants to do and what an organization can do. I balance the resources that we have to do different things, our staff, our investments, all of our programs, with the hopes, desires, and dreams of what the members of the organization want us to be. And so that expresses itself to me through the board. That's the main way that work comes. So sometimes I get to play a consultative role with the board to help them focus and lens their strategy in the right directions and highlight where we could be stronger or where there's opportunities. And at other times, I get to reallocate the resources and distribution of things that we have in place in order to affect that strategy or that goal as expressed. And so, the role of the CEO is in many ways a balance point or a pressure point of these different sides of the organization, of what it can currently be versus what it wants to be.
And just for the sake of context, can you just remind the audience what your role was immediately prior? I know you have military leadership experience, so on and so forth. But
sure.
What was the role immediately prior to this one?
So right before coming to the AANA, I was the CEO at the American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine, which is a small physician organization that very interesting area of healthcare. They had 4,000 or 5,000 members total over the years, and
4,000 or 5,000, you said?
Yeah. They were small.
But
before they were an interesting organization. That was my first role as a chief executive, and it was a good place for me to have that role. And you learn a lot anytime it's your first time doing a thing. You learn things that you do well, and you learn things that you need to improve on. And I learned both of those things at that organization. But before that, I worked with worked with the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons as their chief technology officer, which there was not just, it was an IT and a business position. Also had some internal
Yeah,
capacity.
you had your foot in both
Yeah,
capacities.
you have your foot, right. And then before that, I was the chief information officer for the American Psychiatric Association. And now we're getting back to March of 2000. So, it's
March of
25 years.
2000.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of CRNAs weren't even born then.
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry, I'm dating. I was in high school. I was. That's
You were
great.
not-
I love it.
Well, if you consider born the date you complete your program or your initial credential, then yeah, you're right.
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
That's definitely true. I want to talk a little bit about. Obviously, a lot of those. There's going to be elements of all of those organizations which are similar, right? That standard board structure, i.e., members elect board.
Yeah.
Board sets endpoints, high-level items, and effectively, you're the control point that says, yes, that's realistic, or no, that's not realistic, or it could be realistic, but you need to go and get me another 10 or $20 million, something like that.
Right.
Is that a fair description?
That is fair. Yeah.
Just as a follow-up, unique to the AANA, unique to CRNAs is that there's so much scope overlap, obviously with physician anesthesiologists, and obviously we want to be very respectful in the conversation for anyone who's listening, but there's obviously scope overlap. I don't think anyone's going to debate that. In any of those prior roles, was there anything like the interprofessional or inter-industry tension that you've seen in anesthesia? You have a view that others don't, right? Because you came to anesthesia effectively fresh, right? You have the CEO's skills, that vision, that operational capability. The tensions in anesthesia were new. I'm curious on your perspective there.
Yeah, so there are, in other areas of healthcare, there are aspects where you see a similar dynamic, not exactly the same. And in my experience, I've run into two different versions of this before the AANA. And at the end, I'll come around to why I think the AANA is uniquely different than those other two, at least in magnitude, if not specifics. My last organization, it's interesting you ask about that. My last organization was, it's an area of healthcare that is in contraction, particularly from the physician side. They're not turning out enough new physicians to meet the demand every year for the work that is done. The organization had spent a long time not really supporting the creation of new programs or advocating for the creations of new programs. And so they were totally getting bitten by the reality that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago and the second best time is right now. And you didn't plant them 20 years ago, so you don't have a crop of people coming in to keep the profession looking the way it is. At the same time that was happening, you saw a lot more nursing coming in, nurse practitioners and in particular, but also some physician assistants that were getting their chops up because the market would demand that more people could do what they did to provide care in occupational medicine. And so that organization was grappling with the confluence of physicians and nurses that could do similar things. So it was interesting to see the lens and how the power dynamic within one organization plays out for that. So you have a physicians organization where you have nursing that is trying to be recognized differently and struggling against the cultural histories of the physician apparatus of power.
Yeah.
Now from my perspective in my role, and part of why some of what I learned there was that sometimes it's just very hard for people to hear things that seem to be very obvious to somebody who is one step removed, and that's an organization that I believe math has determined the outcome, and it's now everybody just needs to accept the outcome. That with their median age at the time, I want to say it was in the low 60s to mid 60s for the physicians. There's zero chance that the physicians were going to be the majority in the profession for very much longer. And if the organization that represents the profession was to continue, it definitely would need to welcome nursing and the care that nursing
had a joint society in that.
Yeah, and it would need to change what it was. So, but but that was hard for them. Separately, you see a similar kind of friction with podiatry and foot and ankle surgeons.
Or the orthopods, yeah.
They run, orthopods versus podiatry. They run into each other a bit, and they have. I don't think anyone listening is going to be surprised to know that there are emotions involved with what they do with
Whatever
each
do you mean? I've never experienced that. Yeah.
but
Could you put it in qualitative terms? Like, how would like maybe a metaphor or analogy for that level of overlap and that tension and what you see in anesthesia?
Oh, I would say, well, for those, so for the orthopodiatry example, it's you go camping and you've been camping, right? Everybody's been
Yes,
camping.
I have been camping. Eagle Scout, all my honor. I was
Awesome.
on my duty
So
to God of my country. I can keep going.
you
but
spend
yes.
a lot of time setting up your tent and figuring out where you want to sleep on the ground, and you get a pretty like sort of, especially specifically in a group camp, you're looking for the best spot, right? You want the softest ground. You want to avoid as much roots. No matter what, you're going to find that thing that is annoying. It's going to wake you up 2 or 3 times a night.
Of course.
And you're going to have to move around and shift around it and deal with it. And to me, it's the level of attention is kind of like that for the podiatry, the orthos, right? There's an irritation. There's
Okay.
clearly some friction going on. And
I'm interested to see how you complete this metaphor. It's really interesting.
Well, in some regards, I kind of think on our side of the fence now, it seems like we set up camp next to a train station. The noise it's constant. There's always some amount of attention that we have to give to it, which is what makes it very different, I think, than my previous experience. So what the AANA deals with and what CRNAs deal with is much more consistent and bona fide overlap with another profession practicing the same thing. One practicing medicine, one practicing nursing, and those have different manifestations. But from the health system standpoint, if you take a step back, you do have 2 bona fide separate professions, each with their own certification tracks, their own education track, and their own philosophy of care that effectively do the same thing, and the outcomes are the same. The quality is the same. We look at this constantly because we're constantly looking for an edge or something that can help protect our profession, your profession, and what we can get to is that care can be provided by both models, by both professions, equally well, and that then you get into you now have a stage where you can have competing professions and competing organizations. And the fact is that neither organization or profession has enough people to meet the demand in the first place. So both have to exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of conversations on the ground every day, not just in terms of what is right from a policy standpoint, but also what is right from or what is appropriate from a modeling standpoint, right? I was saying, all anesthesia practitioners are certified. They're not all the same, right? Some are dumber than a bag of hammers. I won't mention them by name on the podcast. That would be inappropriate, but that's good perspective. You also, I know you are connected with IFNA, the International Federation of Nurse Anesthetists, or at least you're aware of it. And I think for the benefit of the audience, you already know this, but I want to frame this appropriately. Canada, the United Kingdom, i.e. Ireland, England, Wales, Scotland, France, Spain, Australia, New Zealand, effectively any healthcare economy or any society, any westernized economy that the United States has anything in common with. CRNAs effectively, I would characterize it as effectively do not exist. There might be some sort of, assistant role, but it's very limited. And not only is it very limited, but in terms of market share, it's a fraction, right? We're talking, I would imagine, less than 5%. Whereas here, right, CRNAs are involved in something like 60, 70%. Just an entirely different environment, right? So with that context, how long do you think it would be until CRNAs had a significantly negative impact if the AANA did not exist?
I think it would be almost immediate. It'd be very quick because the thing, like if we assume, Thanos snap, right? Tomorrow there's no AANA. The organization just stops existing. That's going to create a vacuum, and all vacuums seek to be filled by something. And the thing that you would see, I would guess, is other interests rushing to try to influence that vacuum and to pivot the collective psyche of the profession into a different direction, to change the makeup of it. They would see an opportunity. Our not being here would create opportunities for others to take money off the table, frankly. And
Sure.
since we live in a society that strives for efficiency and is largely defined by financial efficiency from certain perspectives, that's gonna tell you who would be interested in removing things from the menu of options for people practicing nurse anesthesiology. So I think it would be very fast that you would see people seeking to fill the void. And if not, for example, a lot of those other countries, even the ones that are on the path to maybe having something like, what we would recognize as a CRNA, eventually emerge. Those professions don't have the same power of self-determination that we do, and we have that here because of the AANA. We set those boundaries. We're kind of the boundary guards of the profession, and if an organization is not in place to look to, here's what we do. We advocate for these people. We make sure that this group of professionals is as good as they can be and holds themselves to a standard to do what they promise to society, but also protects those people from encroachments of other organizations and other interests in that society. Other people will start to nibble away at those borders. They'll encroach in on our space, and I think it would happen very quickly. It might take a long time for it to come to whatever the next state is, but it would be fast that people would see the opportunity. And would there still be, getting to the earlier part of the conversation, would there still be non-physicians administering anesthesia? Yeah, for sure. Because there aren't enough physicians to do it, and the economics don't support that. But would they look like what we have today? Not remotely, I think, in the long term.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I totally agree, and I'm certainly not auditioning for a job, but I think, well, actually, let me ask you this question before reflecting on your answer there. Do you know your counterpart at the American Society of Anesthesiologists?
I do.
You have a good rapport?
So we're developing, this might be news to
the audience here,
folks listening, to the audience. Historically, there's been off and on interactions between the AANA CEO and the ASA CEO. The previous ASA CEO, Paul Pomerantz, is something because I'm not a practitioner or a clinician. I work within a group of professionals who work in professional associations. Paul Pomerantz was one of those people. I've known Paul probably going back 2002, 2003 is the first time I met Paul. We've been sort of a friendly acquaintance over the years since then.
Run in the same circles a little bit.
Yeah, we run in the same circles. We share a profession and interest even when they're not aligned. However, so that's pretty common that people who work in associations know people who work at other associations. And we'll have some amount of engagement with them. Now, the ASA and the AANA's leadership has off and on over the years had different periods where there was some amount of frequency in their interactions. That, for whatever reason, did not survive the dual changeovers between our organizations. So when Paul retired, the tradition of meeting with the AANA CEO did not continue, nor did it survive the transition from Randy Moore to the interim CEO to me. Those things sort of fell by the wayside. So it's something that
do you want to go on record now and say you'd like to begin that conversation again? We can send it over. We can send this clip over to, I don't even know who it is.
Yeah, well, his name is Brian Riley.
Okay.
Yeah, I know his name. I know him. We've had some conversations,
Good. Seems
and
like a good thing.
I think it could be. Yeah, right now, the thing about organizational relationships is, um, if you don't have a conversation, you tend to always assume the worst, and you have no
Indeed.
perspective of what the psyche of the other organization is. And without going into details and things, I can say that there are elements of each of our organizations that will consistently think the worst of the other, and for some people, I'm sure those extreme views are completely valid and justified. But we know that not everybody in these professions shares those views. We've had
Of
those
course. Of
conversations.
course.
So right now, the organizational positions are what they are. But having a conversation is something that can be done to hopefully help avoid uh, miscommunications. It gives an opportunity for one or the other of us to say, did you guys really mean that? Did you intend for this? Because our organizations, and this has not happened, but having a dialogue can allow for this to happen if it was ever relevant. Um, we could be a little bit more intelligent in how we do or don't engage or react to or not
Mhm.
react to what our alternative or what the other organizations do. So that can happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well said. I think this is very wise on your part. I'm hosting, but I'm sharing my opinion. I think this is very wise to start those conversations. I think going back to our previous question, um, if I think one of the keys to professional success generally is a superpower of not taking things personally, right?
Yeah.
Realizing most things that people do is about them. It's not really about you. You don't have to pick that up, so to speak. If a physician says that, an anesthesiologist says that, they're the best thing ever, right? That doesn't necessarily diminish your position and vice versa. Right? I try to have these conversations because our group is interprofessional, but where I actually work. Um, but if the ANA didn't exist, and I'm not auditioning for a job here, but if the ANA didn't exist, and the ASA didn't do everything in their power to advance the cause of their members, they would be. That is their duty. That is their fiduciary
Sure.
duty. They need to be faithful to the interests of their members, and they certainly should be. And I try to encourage people on both sides. There's nothing wrong with that. I think largely your comment on we can be more intelligent is well taken. I often encourage folks to say, think about things locally, like just let people work
Yeah.
things out locally rather than trying to get the United States government or a state government to figure it all out for us. Because they're they're working super well lately, which is I almost can't even
Sure.
make that joke anymore. It's so bad. Okay,
Yeah.
I
No,
appreciate.
I mean,
I it's bad. It's bad right now. Um,
yeah.
I appreciate your input on that. I know it's a touchy subject. Let's switch gears a little bit. ANA CEO, you're going to be walking around with your little badge that says CEO on it. Or you can be all humble. Hi, I'm Bill. Right, Bill Bruce. Someone's going to make a joke about Braveheart if they're as old as I am.
They know.
Every Gen Zer on here is like, thinks probably think it's a terrible movie or they don't know what it is. But you're going to be there. You'll be pressing the flesh, shaking hands, so on and so forth. Going to meet a lot of everyday members. Going to meet a lot of future members, a lot of people in their training program. From your point of view, what is the most common myth, the most common misunderstanding about what the ANA is doing well, or just a misunderstanding about our professional association in general that you're correcting with the everyday member, something that sticks out in your mind that is coming up regularly?
Yeah. So the biggest myth and misunderstanding, and I'll add to that something else I think you might be interested to. The biggest myth is, I mean, we're more than advocacy and credit transfers. You know,
Hmm.
those are the things that we see
Tell
the
me more
most.
about that.
Well, I mean, and that kind of gets to the real answer, the most underutilized part of the organization, which is something that people at Congress will know about, but um, the secret, the thing that I want us to be to continue to grow is our attendance at our events. Our events are of enormous value. They are changing. We've been experimenting with different things in recent years.
They are changing in what way?
So we get a lot of feedback from attendees about the sometimes repetitiveness of the things that show up in the program, and maybe the lack of creativity. And so we've been for the past couple of years, and will continue for the next several years, to see what we hope are perceived as improvements to our events. We're going to be doing more to make them a little bit more engaging. If you could kill things with both metrics if you go too far, of course, and evaluations are one way that you could generate those metrics. So when we ask people, when you look at event evaluations, one of the things that they'll say, and this is true for all associations, by the way, not just the AANA, I go to events for the education. Okay, that's a very common refrain. I go for the education, and I think that's because a lot of people are reimbursed because of the education.
Of course.
And so that's the obvious answer. The second thing is I go for the networking, and then maybe it's I go to meet some exhibitors, depending on the reasons. And I think the way those questions get asked, they might support some answers that aren't the actual reality. And because what we see in the data is that half of the people who attend at most claim half of the available credit. So
they're not there primarily.
Right.
True or false statement. They're there somewhat for the education and
Yes.
mostly for the experience.
There's other reasons for it. And so if we pay attention, to the other things that could be there, the connections, making it much more of a social event, a fun meeting, engaging, lots of things to do that are not the same format of session. Changing things up. And I think one of the things that the younger generation is demanding more of organizations like us is that we have more creativity and more flexibility in the way we think about delivering knowledge. Personally, my whole life I've struggled with the concept of I go and I sit in a room and I listen to somebody talk at me for 45 to 50 minutes, and
Right.
somehow I magically have absorbed things because I'm an autodidact. I teach myself almost everything I need to have my hands on and read things on my own. And then, a 15 to 20 minute lecture is a great way for me to sort of reinforce and clarify some of what I've already taught myself or what I've learned elsewhere. And in traditional education, that's not a delivery model that is as well. It's,
I've never been asked to give a 20-minute talk. I would love that as a speaker, frankly, because people's attention really drops off after about 20 minutes. You have to really ramp it up in the second half to keep their attention.
It does. So, and again, I mean, I'm more speaking about, my approach to learning, which is not what we're projecting onto the event.
You're not inviting me to a 20-minute. This is not an official invite.
This is not an official invite yet, though. I hope in the future it could be. I would love to see us. I'd love to see us do more, rapid fire stuff than we are, and we're moving in that direction. We're bringing some things that are differently engaging. And this year, we have a hackathon this year where we actually have a facilitator who's coming in. We're going to have room for, I could be wrong on this thing, 75 or 100 people that will be able to participate in this. And
that's awesome.
Pick a problem and chew on it.
Sharon Pierce hosting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Sharon.
You chose a great host. Yeah. She'll do a great job.
I'm sure.
Got that Southern charm.
Yes, she will. So we're doing that. We've changed some of the fun side of the event too. We've kind of re-envisioned the whole party with a purpose. Last year we had a real smash with the aircraft carrier, and I think
what is it going to be this year? Isn't it a rooftop or something?
It's a rooftop series of bars downtown.
Series of rooftops.
Yeah, there's like 3 different venues that are all connected. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we have the capacity for it to be an outstanding event, and we're going to need it because, in spite of the fact that I wish more people would come to our meetings, we actually are going to have our largest Congress ever this year.
Really?
Yeah.
How many people are going to be there?
So far we are 3,963, which is about 300 or so more than the 75-year anniversary year, which was the record. And it's 2006, 2008.
Congratulations!
Thank you.
4,000 person conferences, that's no small thing.
We're pretty sure we're holding our breath. We think we're going to pass 4,000 once we get through some of the on-sites. It's going to be fun.
Sure. Okay.
Um,
Awesome.
but even so, that spells an opportunity for us, and that's something that I hope people do listen to. I mean, the event is, there's more to the event than, just education, or, there's education, there's exhibitors, there's networking, there's peer mentoring, there's, all of those things. And we're trying to be more creative in how we deliver these things, so more people will drive value. Because if you think about 65,000 people and you have a 4,000 person conference, that leaves 61,000 people that aren't
Sure.
at the conference this year. Now, take away the people that are hyper engaged, that come all the time, and the people who come every other year, and there's a good chunk of those, and you're down to, there's about 1,500 people that are, this is going to be the one they're giving a shot. And math suggests that we might never see any of those 1,500 again, because out of 65,000,
Right. They might only
their
come once
career is
in their
over by the
career.
time they're going to loop back in. Whereas most professional associations, your annual conference is going to get people about every 3 years. You're going to get roughly a third of your membership is showing up to your annual conference. And there's a lot of things that change that for CRNAs, but I think we should see more utilization of our events than we do, even factoring that in. And so I think there's an opportunity here for us to do better and do more. And so we're more than just credits. We're more than just advocacy. And I think the most value that we have potentially is in our events. And I hope more people decide to give it a try.
Yeah, I can, a shameless plug. All right, obviously I'm a member of the association. I'm playing host today, but people will ask me the question I get asked the most, which is, tell me about the business. Tell me about the business. And then I tell them two things. The first, which is anesthesia reimbursement is a fraction of what we get paid, so it gets very complex very quickly. The second thing I tell them is most of what I learned at meetings. Right, I talk to people constantly. Just meet people. There's a certain power. You just kind of bump off opportunity in these places, and that's what most people don't get, which you can never do right here. Right, you can't do that through a camera. All right, I want to ask one more question.
Sure.
Right before we wrap up, it's a busy week. Thank you for making the time. We started the conversation talking about your experience with all of these non-anesthesia organizations, and I think there's significant value in some of those things. I know you a little bit on a personal level. I know you've experienced significant, you've had personal challenges. Every leader brings something to the table, something that drives them, something from their childhood, some sort of almost traumatic experience. What's something from your background that you're still pulling in to your professional life, your career, your leadership, something that maybe people don't know about currently?
This one's tough. I've had an interesting path, and I think of all people as not just the sum of their experiences, but the sum of their choices. Every time you make particularly if you make a hard choice, that has some incremental effect on defining you. And those choices and those experiences have always interplayed. And so, without going into the details, I'll say that I grew up with a very strong affinity for a lack of hypocrisy and an awareness that each of us can have an impact on the well-being of those around us, even if small. And so, one thing that I try very hard to do is to be consistent and doing the things that I say that I'm going to do, or doing my best to do them. And because I grew up in situations where I couldn't always depend on things that should have been constant, I try very hard, and I get value from when I'm successful at being constant and being something that can be counted on in that way for the people around me. And right now, one of the most rewarding things that I get to do is do that for this organization and its staff. And that means, being consistent, and the advice that I give to our board in terms of what kind of culture is a good board and what kinds of philosophies and sort of how to be a stronger future. Because if you're strong today, you'll be stronger tomorrow. And to be strong today, you have to trust yourself tomorrow. So always trust a future version of you to make the right choice at the time, and get out of your way, get out of your own way. And I could do the same thing for staff. The staff have responded very well to this consistency and this kind of ethos. And there are some things when we talk to the people who put on this the survey that drives that award or that series of awards. There are some aspects of the engagement survey they use for which we were the benchmark. We set the standard nationwide, not just in associations, but of all organizations. There are a few metrics where we've been interviewed to talk about what is it that you do at the AANA that is working this well, because we don't see these results very typically. So, we've become a leader in the association workspace because of, I think, having a very positive and consistent and value-driven culture. And there have been times in my life where I've lacked that, and there have been times where I've had that. And I bring a need to create that for other people. I'm never going to work in healthcare. I'm never going to be able to improve people's lives directly that way. So the work I do here and the environment that I set up, it should give people a small amount of peace and sense of being rewarded, because if they do that, they will do better work, which means we can collectively help the profession do better work. All of this builds on itself, and it's a way that I could contribute something to society that I wouldn't have a better way to do somewhere else.
I love it. We're going to leave it right there. Bill Bruce, thank you so much.
Pleasure's mine. Anytime, Joe.
That's all for this episode of Anesthesia Deconstructed. For more information based on today's discussions, be sure to visit us at anesthesia-deconstructed.com. You'll also gain access to our blogs, editorials, and more resources to keep you updated on the science, politics, and realities of today's medical industry. That's anesthesia-deconstructed.com.